Oh, Randy, thank you for joining me for Neurodiversity Month. We've had interesting technical challenges, and I'm so glad that you're here and that you've been patient with me. You are one of Cuddlist practitioners that identifies as neurodiverse, and we're just learning about what that whole thing is here, and we still have so much to learn. But from what I understand it, neurodiversity encompasses autism spectrum, so autism and Asperger's, but also ADHD and a whole lot. Really, it seems like any kind of way that the brain processes information kind of differently than what we think of as neurotypical kind of seems like it's neurodiversity. But I'm curious if you would share with us what your experience of that word is, or your experience of yourself.
Sure. Hearing you talk about all that, my thought was, viva la difference. I would hate it if we were all the same. I knew that I was different growing up. I was diagnosed with ADHD at about 13 or 14, but I wasn't really a typical case because the medications didn't exactly work on me. And I knew that I had trouble relating to people and didn't really pick up social cues very well, but yet I was really good at abstract things like math and science. And I just tended to do everything differently. And that's what it means to me, is I'm different. And as I've grown up and learned to accept myself more, in a way, it has turned into, parts of it have turned into a kind of superpower, because at least people with Asperger's, or autism spectrum disorder, as it's now called, we tend to have a special interest. I think that's why the ADHD diagnosis, because our mind will hit on something and just stick with that forever. For me, I got lucky. Mine was science. And I tend to understand the things around me in a way that other people don't. So, in fact, I have to use cognition to do things that other people have circuits in their brain to do, like recognizing faces, recognizing social cues, excuse me.
Sure.
Recognizing a lot of things, even knowing what it is that I'm, like what kind of object I'm looking at. It doesn't just hit me right away. I have to actually think about it. And I've exercised that part of my brain so much that now it seems like I can see things and figure things out that other people can't.
Wow.
So,
can you give me an example?
So I like to delight in the little things. And so I'm going to give you two examples of little things. Sounds. If there's a squeak somewhere, or there's some kind of sound that people don't know what it is, I seem to always know exactly what it is, where it's coming from, what kind of piece of metal or whatever is creating that sound. Same thing with a glint of light. Anything having to do with the physical world around me. I know what's inside it and what's making it do whatever it does. And in the realm of people, it's difficult to navigate real time, but after I've had some time to think about an interaction or the way, what motivates people, I seem to have some really, really good insight. Which brings me to another aspect of my condition. It's a lot like ADHD, and we can go into a state of what's called hyperfocus, where we're really tuned in on one thing and very, very deeply. And when I do that with another person, it's like magic. I
bet it can feel amazing to be on the receiving side of that focused attention.
Yeah, it is. And not many people are able to enjoy it because, as I was told, when somebody's different and you don't know why or how or in what way they're different, you just know there's something different about this person. That kind of registers as the unknown, which is a little scary.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, I've noticed that people tend to be frightened by me, especially
Mm-hmm.
women.
Uh-oh, your video just disappeared. Can you come back? But as you're coming back, I want to just interrupt you there for a second and say that that focused attention is such a blessing in Cuddlist sessions, right? I know that
Exactly.
I can offer that to my clients, and my mind quiets and they get to receive that attention, and it's like bliss. Because I'm not doing 20 different things, which I normally am. It's just, oh, I'm just here with them. But I also wanted to respond to what you said about being different and people reacting to the unknown as though it's scary, right? Which makes sense. You know, the thing that's beyond the edge of the firelight when we're tribal, like, you know, neo-human, whatever, right? We evolved where the dark was scary, the unknown was scary, it might eat us. It's pretty deep in our brains and our limbic systems. But that's also why we're doing this Neurodiversity Month, so that there's less unknown and more understanding, so that your gifts hopefully will be more received, and other folks who have similar conditions to yours will meet with less of that, oh, it's a scary unknown, and more of, oh, I understand this.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
And so once in a while, for whatever reason, uh, certain people will not really seem to notice or be put off by that, and they benefit greatly, let me tell you.
Right.
And
I
not
love how
only
you light
that,
up when you say that too. It's so fun.
yeah, it's delightful. It's really rich and warm and loving, for me, and I imagine for them too. So, but also, you know, there are a lot of, being disconnected from the social world as we are, there are a lot of people with autism spectrum disorder who need cuddle, who are not professional cuddlers. And I'm really good with them. I know how to handle them.
Excellent.
What to, you know, when to not really probe too much or ask too many questions, what to ignore, you know.
Can you give us some tips on that? So if somebody comes to me that's on the autism spectrum, what might I expect, and what might be some good approaches?
Well, they may certainly appear nervous. They may appear distracted. They may appear withdrawn, and they may have facial tics and all that. And you just kind of have to ignore that and treat them like normal people. And treat them lovingly, and they will respond to touch the same way as anybody else.
Yeah. So lovingly, welcomingly, not getting nervous myself because they seem nervous, or not getting
Right.
standoffish myself because they seem standoffish, but staying really open and warm, right?
Yes. And you know, I'm asking the question, is there something wrong, or you know, taking a step back and trying to address what it is that's different. I don't think they're going to be able to really help you with that. They're not going to be able to say, I'm different, or I'm nervous, or anything. They may not even be nervous. This might be normal for them.
Right.
So those kinds of surface differences you have to ignore.
Would it be useful to ask any question, like, is there something in the room that's making you uncomfortable? Something like that, like maybe, I don't know,
Well,
the texture or something, because I think sometimes
exactly.
sensory, like
Texture.
hypersensory kind of stuff can be part of it. So something that's I'm not even aware of could be distressing, perhaps.
Yes, there could be a sound in the room that's distracting them that you're not even aware of, or a texture or something, or the temperature, or even something feng shui, like what direction we're sitting in. And by the time we've become adults, we're pretty self-conscious. So asking, is there something that I can do to make you comfortable, might go better than, is there anything making you uncomfortable?
Absolutely, right? Yes, that definitely, yeah. Instead of putting the focus on the what's wrong, right?
Right,
Because
right,
that's something that
because,
we do in the sessions too, right? We often ask our clients, is there anything that would make this even better, right? Are are you okay with what's happening? Is there anything that would make it even better, right? So is there anything that would
yeah,
make you more comfortable? Um, Anything, and I'll often say to most of my clients things like, how's the lighting? We can make it brighter or dimmer, you know, and I'll give kind of specific things rather than just a generic, how's the room? Would you like music? Would you like quiet? Would you like to sit here or over there? Choices that make it a little bit easier to state preferences and to know that preferences are fine to have.
hmm.
Yeah.
If you notice them fidgeting with a piece of their own clothing, that might be something to ignore. But if they're fidgeting with the blanket that's underneath that you guys are sitting on, and that's your blanket, you may want to ask, is there something I can change here for you, or are you all right?
Right. Okay. Yeah, the subtle cues. That'd be good to know. Um, so what's been delightful for you about being a cuddlist?
My very first client um, was somebody who was traveling in from far away, from Canada, in fact. And she had had some trauma around touch earlier in her life and hadn't had a hug in 10 years, she said.
Oh my goodness.
And
Yeah.
she had decided to try cuddle as a healing modality. That was my very first client. I can't tell you how proud I am of that, how delighted I am by that. That is exactly why I'm here. And, like I say, there are a lot of people walking around literally starving for attention, for touch. I consider eye contact to be a form of touch.
Mm-hmm.
Eye contact is a cuddle.
Hmm.
We don't get a lot of that either. And a lot of us are afraid to make eye contact. I actually learned it, but that's just something else to keep in mind. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's what's been delightful, is when I can provide something that somebody has been starving for. And the only reason they can't take it is because there's no safe way.
Mm-hmm.
They don't come to me because I'm a good cuddler or for my body in any way. They come to me for the boundaries that I've learned and the principles that I follow.
That's so beautifully said. Exactly, right? That's when people think that Cuddlist is about getting a good snuggle. It's like you'll probably get that, but that's not the real value that we're offering. It's like the value that I bring to my clients is exactly what you just said. The boundaries, the clarity, what I offer, what I don't offer, and the welcoming and the acceptance and
The safety.
the
So
safety.
yeah, that's another thing. I've seen what can happen to people when they feel safe. You almost don't. You might think, well, you see that all the time. People don't feel threatened, therefore they feel safe. But actually, no.
Mm-hmm.
When someone feels truly safe, they come alive. It's like a different person. You see stuff coming out of them that this childish joy. Um, and you see them stretching out and really enjoying enjoying themselves. And it's
Absolutely.
amazing.
I'm going to pull that out as a quote from this interview with you here. When someone feels safe, they come alive. That is so true. And there's a big difference between walking through the world not feeling immediately threatened. Yeah. Walking through the world not feeling immediately threatened and feeling safe. Like that's not the same
Big
experience.
difference.
Yeah. Yeah. So just because there's no tiger chasing me right now doesn't mean I actually feel safe. And the Cuddlist sessions, talk to me a little bit about your experience of safety in our work.
So as you were talking just there, um, and I'm sorry, I've had kind of a chronic cough for months, I'm not really sick. My lungs have been kind of having a problem.
Yeah.
But as you were talking, I had the idea of safety from scrutiny.
Mm.
You know, we don't want to be examined or 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 found out or probed in any way. Just let me be,
Mm.
and I will feel safe. And of course, protect me.
Mm.
So I forget your question, but the idea of safety goes way beyond physical safety. There's social safety. There's emotional safety.
How do you offer that in a
People,
session, the social and the emotional safety? How do you offer that for the folks who are listening?
it's, gosh, it's what I don't do more than what I do.
Mm.
You know, um, I don't ask personal questions. I work with what the client gives me. If they tell me something, well, that means they want to talk about that thing. If they are not bringing up a subject, even if it's something that's obvious, I don't need to bring it up. That's the first thing that comes to my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Even just a quizzical look can come off as a question. Questions, while people like to be, they like it when you're curious about them, that's in stage 2.
Mm.
In stage 1, you want to make sure they don't feel like there's any evaluation going on.
Yeah.
No evaluations or invalidations. That's my strict policy.
That seems really good, and particularly relevant for folks who might be on the autism spectrum or who have other neurodiversity that have been poked and prodded and evaluated, and people have tried to figure out what's wrong with you and had that
That's
lens.
right.
It's like, nothing is wrong with me. And that's one of the huge gifts that a Cuddlist can offer, is we welcome our clients, whoever shows up. I welcome whoever shows up as they are. We've got this clear container. There's touch, there's boundaries. It's not going to be sexual touch. It's going to be curious about them, all of the focus on what do they want, but me promising I'm not going to do anything that I don't want to do. And so there's this, like, we also agree that we're going to speak up if we're uncomfortable, right? That's one of the fundamental rules of Cuddlist sessions. And so I also think, because I have a couple of clients who are somewhere on that spectrum, that the clear boundaries are really good for everybody, but especially for folks that have a harder time reading social cues.
Oh my gosh.
It's like,
Yes.
oh, thank you for
What
spelling
a
it
relief.
out. Right? Absolutely. So we've got a code of conduct here, and we stick to it, and it's lovely. So you get to know what's expected.
I wanted to somehow try and say, I get professional cuddle from my teacher, Jean Francois. And what makes me, I realized in those sessions that I had actually never felt fully safe before, ever. Not with my parents, not in any school, not in any relationship, not with even with my friends, not the way I did in that session. And a big part of that was her clear boundaries, which brings me to our Cuddlist agreement. Yes, the client agrees to say something if they're uncomfortable, but oh my gosh, it's so important that the client knows that I'm going to say something if I'm uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
That's the other half of safety. Nobody wants to be cuddling with somebody that doesn't want to be doing what they're doing.
Oh my gosh, no. Yeah.
So yeah, I really like that agreement, both sides of it.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
And it has to be sincere, when you say, and I promise to let you know if there's anything that I'm uncomfortable with. If you feel sincerity as you're saying it, that will come off. And It needs to be sincere. You don't just trot the words out, you feel them as you're saying them.
Yeah. And that it also, it's also important then to demonstrate it. And maybe, well, it's definitely really nice to demonstrate it on something that's not such a big deal. Like, oh, I noticed, you know, I'll do something like this. Like, I need to shift, right? Like, one of my favorite positions is I'm leaning back against the wall and the client is leaning on me. Right? This is kind of, we're both facing the same direction and they're being held. And after about, you know, a half hour or so of that, my lower back might get a little tight. And so I'll be like, hey, why don't we shift and let's see what else would feel good, you know?
Right, so that they know you're actively taking care of yourself.
Yeah, yeah. And then it makes it easier because it's hard to speak up, right? We really have been conditioned to go along with and tolerate and endure what the people around us want or what we think is going to work in the social setting. And that's true for everyone. And I'm curious if it's even more, if it's even harder to speak up in some way for someone who's been identified as different or wrong.
Yeah, you know, because I learned in my life, in my early life, I'm trying to unlearn this, but to fly below the radar.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't work very well. And there's a movie where, I forget the name of the movie, but somebody with autism spectrum disorder was in a parade wearing a shark suit. Some people might in the audience might remember this. And when asked why, he said, well, uh, I don't know if it was a shark. It was a some big animal. And he says, well, when you're maybe it was a dinosaur. When you're a dinosaur, you are the parade. We can't fly below the radar. And about speaking up. Yeah, saying no is literally an unpleasant experience.
Mm-hmm.
People need to understand that. And you need to be cognizant of what you ask for. Don't force the person to say no.
Yeah.
They may need to.
Can
They
you
need
tell
to
me a
be
little bit
able
more about
to.
that? About it
Yeah.
being actually an unpleasant experience to say no. Like, is it a physical sensation? Is it like, what happens for you or has in the
Well,
past?
sure. There's a contraction in my heart and in my throat. I feel like I'm disappointing that person or the world around me, or like I'm not on board and not being that full thing that I'm supposed to be in the world if I say no, like I'm disappointing somebody. And I've been taken advantage for that. You know, sometimes people will ask for something relying on that you don't want to say no.
Yeah.
So getting back to the Cuddlist agreement, um, you know, if the cuddlist says no in a lighthearted, casual way, that goes a long way to letting the client know that you're actively taking care of yourself, and that you're able to say no, and that it's safe for them to ask. They're not supposed to worry about asking.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's what they're there
Sometimes,
for.
right. Sometimes at the beginning of the session, I'll do a little kind of a role play or a practice on saying no. And I'll say, you know, I'll ask you a question and you say no, and you can ask me a question and I'll say no, so we can practice saying no to each other. Do you recommend that, or would you call that too challenging at the beginning?
Yes, because they're going to be looking at the expression on your face and your body language and the lilt in your voice as you're saying no. And if you keep a smile, if there's just no evidence that you're going through something painful, that you're able to do that and stay happy, they're going to feel a lot safer.
Yes.
It isn't just about proving that you can say no. It's about showing that it's comfortable to do that. No
That
problem.
no doesn't hurt me and no
Nope.
doesn't make me reject you. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why we celebrate a no.
Yeah. Right, and I love that part of the session. I was in a workshop a few years ago, and it's when I first got how powerful no is. The workshop happened to be Like a Pro with Dr. Betty Martin, but there was another practitioner there, and it was about day 3, and it was a snack break, and we're talking, and then I don't remember what our words were before this, but we're holding hands. Both of us are jumping up and down and going, "Oh my gosh, your no is a valuable gift. I can only trust your yes as much as I trust your no." And it was such a like, no is awesome. I still sometimes don't like hearing it and don't like saying it, but it's so true that being able to say no makes a yes mean anything.
I'm glad you just told me that. Yeah, it's a gift. When I say no, I'm keeping them safe too.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything that you can think of that would make Cuddlist easier, more accessible for folks with neurodiversity, folks who might be, I'm guessing, lonely, having been judged, they feel different, socially awkward perhaps? What would help Cuddlist seem friendlier and safer?
Well, I guess seeing more um, statements about neurodiversity in the Cuddlist profiles. And if there was more than just 1 or 2 of us that said we welcome neurodiverse clients, if there was, say, 20% of the Cuddlists that say I love working with neurodiverse clients, I'd feel a lot more comfortable. I don't know how
That's a
many
great
there are
idea.
now.
That's
It
a
might be,
super easy thing too, because if you're
yeah,
comfortable, you could just put it in your profile and say, I welcome neurodiverse
sure.
clients. What a great suggestion. I'm going to do that after we get off the call.
I'm going to look at my profile too. I haven't looked at it in a long time. Make
Yeah, I don't
sure
think
that
I've
it says
changed mine in a year or 2. It could probably use an update. But yeah, and I speak about welcoming a wide range of people, but I hadn't, it's partially why I love that we're doing this focus of the month on neurodiversity, because I haven't thought about it as a demographic, I suppose, and to actually speak to this demographic that could benefit from our work. Seems like a really good
okay.
thing to do.
You mentioned that. So as a demographic, I work here at Raytheon. I'm in the parking lot right now in my car. And I would say easily half, if not more, of the people here are somewhere on that autism spectrum. I just know it. You know, and of course, they're very welcoming to that. In fact, we got a guest speaker recently. I forget her name. I think it was Barbara from a company called Auticon that employs only people on the autism spectrum, and they're an IT company. I thought that was a great idea. I bet, you know, and they do things like they don't use fluorescent lighting.
Mm-hmm.
They dim the lights for us and for them, their employees, and use incandescent lights, which was far easier on the eyes. And they just work to make the working environment less distracting and less harsh.
That sounds
You mentioned
beautiful.
something about
Go ahead.
you mentioned something about textures. Yes, there's a thing about textures. Certain textures just I don't like that. I can't, you know, I can make a decision to tolerate it, but I'm going to get away from it as soon as I can. And I never exactly know what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe scratchy things, but I need to be prepared for a change in texture, physical texture. Otherwise, it's distracting.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Well, Stephen Randolph Tadeo, or Randy, thank you so much for the time here. I think we're going to wrap it up soon. Is there anything that you would like to say or touch on that we haven't?
I don't know if other people on the spectrum are like me very much. Haven't really gotten into the community, but inside here, there's an absolute ocean of love. and gratitude. And I wish I could spread it around. Maybe the rest of us are the same way. You wouldn't know it. We can appear cold sometimes, but we have a rich set of feelings inside. And it can be a treasure to get into.
Yay. Thank you for finding Cuddlist and for finding a structure that works for you to offer some of that love and that ocean of warmth and heart that you have. I really appreciate, I doubt if it was an easy path for you to get here. And I really appreciate that you're here and that you've taken the time to talk to us today. And go ahead, what was that you want to say?
You're welcome. It's a pleasure.
All right, beautiful. Yeah, that image is very much with me of you having this huge gift, and particularly that client you mentioned where you got to really offer her that gift and she got to really receive it, and how amazing that was for both of you. May you have many more client sessions where you get to give the fullness of your gift and it's received, all of it.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.